Alright, so I've got some things to say about this castle here, and they're not exactly good things. So, first off, right, I mean, because you have the keep, right? And, and that's all fine and dandy. But, and it's surrounded by a city, so essentially it's a citadel, um, for the castle to be in, right? And here you have the main keep, which I'm currently walking around. However, something I'm noticing is that oh, I got to turn around this way. Okay, so essentially, if you look up, right, probably notice that this castle was probably made in the mid to early medieval period, which is probably around, because this is European, it's probably made around the 11 to 1300s, but it's 300-year difference. But this exact type is actually probably made around the 1300s, so maybe about 100 or so years ago from the time period that we're in now, which is 1497. And so it's the beginning of the Renaissance period, and so the medieval period has just ended. But if you look up, you're gonna see all these little like arcs, and those are masticulations. But technically, those ones aren't. Those are just there for aesthetics. And because they're just there for aesthetics, that does not make this a historically accurate European castle. And the reason why the masticulations are wrong is because masticulations are made so that way, as an enemy has essentially gone over here, right? As they're up against this wall, right? The masticulations serve a purpose so that way the guards on the actual keep can fire down at you. Hold on. And so now it's over. Here. So if we go up here, right? Now what you're also going to notice that I do like about this castle, however, is the fact that they're... Anyway, yeah, so what you're going to notice, right, is that they've got some really good crenellations, right? And crenellations are essentially what make this little gap and the tooth in this wall. And I really like the fact that these ones are actually much higher than the head height. Typically, these would be about at shoulder height or exactly an average man's head height. Now I'm guessing maybe because these guys are Italian, maybe they're about 5'6", about like my height. So maybe you guys like 6 foot. This would be about his head height. But yeah, so these work pretty well. And then here we have this tower. This is called the donjon, which dungeon comes from, because in the donjon you put them in the highest part of the castle, which is basically the hardest part of the castle to get through. And so that's where originally they'd put all the prisoners. So, in fact, that's mostly where they put the prisoners, is in the donjon and not a basement dungeon. And this design, it's valid. You don't see it too much with historical castles. Mostly, I mean, this one actually is pretty accurate because it's on the edge and it's not like in the center, and so it's kind of like it serves its own building with its own supports and structures. And in order for them to have a stone flooring like this, they would need to have archways and all that good stuff. Also, something else I could point out is this building over here that connects to the castle. I'm guessing it was added on later, and also the crenellations on that castle are just for aesthetics only. And I guess during the and if it was made in the medieval period, ranging of like 600 years or so, aesthetics on a castle was not a thing at all. I mean, you'd have it on the inside of castles, like you'd have murals and paintings and all that on the inside, but having aesthetics on the outside of the castle the functionality was absolutely useless, so it wasn't done. So I'm guessing during the Renaissance period is when aesthetics came into play a lot more. But overall, this castle is very it's fairly accurate, but there's also just a lot of inaccuracies about it too. Like, there's no proper gatehouse to the rest of this castle piece, and the gatehouse has a main function. I'll kind of show that real quick of what a gatehouse is. Right, and then here's the gatehouse. And you know, there's some things I like about it, and then there are also a lot of things I don't like about it. Like, if you look at the masticulations up there, they're also fake, which means that the designers did not know how to, or know the purpose and functionality of a masticulation, which, again, was essentially just so that way you can get a much better angle and range of fire when firing upon enemies, as they can, so they can't take cover right against the wall. And then it looks like, I don't think it's possible to get up there, but it looks like those crenellations with air loops, those are pretty accurate. You see that a lot. Something I don't like about this gatehouse is the fact that it only has one portcullis. That's essentially the gate and the gate piece of it. Essentially what you would actually see in history more than not, especially with one that's large, is two gates. And the gates, far more commonly than not, would not actually be made out of metal, because metal was a very valuable resource, and people would actually use that on things like weapon and armor. So actually, this portcullis should actually be made out of wood. And also something that they should have added but did not add are murder holes. And murder holes are literally just these big old holes you'd put kind of in the center of the castle part, so that way you can, essentially, if they get through one gate, they are trapped inside this other gate, which looks like technically should be there but isn't. And you basically throw things like rock, burning sand, really hot water, and arrows down on your enemies as they're trying to break through that second gate. So this gatehouse is not a proper gatehouse, meaning it's not historically accurate to its time period. Therefore, the developers did not go into an extreme detailed research of the functionality of a castle. And the exact definition of the castle is essentially a fortified residence. Now, as time moved on and castles became more aesthetic, that wasn't exactly necessarily the case of a castle any longer. These castle walls, they're okay. Like, the height is fine, but again, something, maybe unless we go out here, I think, is it? What I think it is? No, okay. Well, maybe. So, essentially, with castles, and actually probably not. Okay, this one doesn't do it very well. So, essentially, with the castle, what you want is you'd want to put a moat around the entire thing, and then you'd want to put a drawbridge here, essentially, so the enemies can't take siege equipment here. And because it's on flat land, that means it is vulnerable to siege equipment, which you don't want. So, again, Florence, Italy, in the year 1497 is not exactly accurate to how it might have been in real life, entirely to the exact details, but nonetheless, Ubisoft did a really good job overall, and that is my little video. Ta-da.